Yo, 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 what is up, everybody? Popo here, bringing guys a new video, and today we're going to be updating our regular Pokemon tier list. The restricted tier list hasn't changed too much, maybe just a couple alterations, but we haven't seen any real breakouts from like Lugia or Lunala or anything like that, so there's no real reason to update that, but there have been a lot of things changing in the regular Pokemon, so I just want to go over it again, see where we're at. Of course, we had the European International Championships that was won by Wolf Glick. His team's not really going to impact this that much because that team outside of Wolf Glick's hands, you know, you got to be Wolf Glick, right? So, yeah, I just wanted to go through. We have every team, staples, very viable, and niche viability. And then down here, and then these ones, this is supposed to be non-tier tier. Um, non-tier tier. All right. Because these are the Pokemon that we haven't tiered yet. So I took away a tier, that's why it's at that. And then here we have trash or the restricted are in here too. But if you see a Pokemon in here that you think is really good, let me know. I'll reconsider it. That's for sure. Because there are some stuff in here that is usable, but it's just like maybe in the GC, you can cook somebody, but otherwise, you're not really doing too much. These are basically the Pokemon you're mostly gonna see. All right, starting off, Tatsugiri. This represents all Tatsugiri, not just this specific Tatsugiri. Dondozo has been doing pretty well recently. It's come back. So I'm gonna put it very viable. It's not good by itself. I would say it's in trash tier if it's by itself. But with Dondozo, it's definitely gonna be very viable. Dondozo will probably have a different tier because of that. Next we have Ditto. I think Ditto is also very viable. It's gonna be on top of Tatsugiri. Pokemon's very good. You can just copy a restricted and end up having two restricted. So it can do some really cool stuff. It can also turn to support Pokemon when you need them for fake out or anything like that. It's besides its HP stat, I mean it's a good Pokemon, right? But there is a lot of Weezings and the Weezing teams kind of destroy the Ditto. So yeah, you gotta do what you gotta do. Chi-Yu. Oh man, I want to put Chi-Yu even higher, but it's not a every team Pokemon. Of course, some teams don't want it, but I think Chi-Yu right now feels extremely strong. There is some sun going around. You're able to do massive damage in the sun. You can go for Dark Pulses, Snarls. You're putting on a lot of pressure. You can use a couple of different items from Focus Sash all the way up into like Choice Specs or Choice Scarf or, even Covert Cloak I've seen. The weirdest one I saw is the GC yesterday. I ran into an Iron Ball Chi-Yu, which was slower than my Calyrex Ice Rider. So, and my Calyrex Ice Rider is 0 speed. So that was not a good time, but you gotta do what you gotta do. Walking Wake is very niche. I thought this Pokemon would be way better than it ended up being, even in the first time. I wonder if in a double restricted format, this Pokemon might be a little bit better. I guess it depends on how that format ends up looking, but man, it just, for some reason, this Pokemon just doesn't do it. Despite the fact that it has barely any weaknesses, it just, I don't know, it just feels so meh. Feels so meh. Raichu also niche viability. It has been used recently. Some people using with Nuzzle, Fake Out, Lightning Rod, of course, especially in Kyogre teams or, a couple of different variations of anti-Miraidon teams. So this Pokemon has been pretty decent recently, but still, it's just one of those Pokemon that just doesn't feel great when it's out of position, and it just doesn't put on any pressure, so your opponent can kind of ignore it sometimes and just take out everything else. Melodic. I think Melodic goes down in the trash tier. This is a Pokemon I did tier okay last time. I think it was in the niche viability, but the more and more this format goes on, the less and less I am seeing this. I have not seen this Pokemon in quite a while. I saw it once on Showdown a few weeks ago, but like it just didn't do anything, and then it got knocked out. But Ninetales, I don't think Ninetales is very good. I think it's probably actually worse than Raichu. I just don't think the Ice team is really performing that well because there's so much sun and there's so much rain out there that like it's really hard to use this Pokemon effectively, and you got to set up those Aurora Veils for it to be any good. It is good into a couple of Pokemon like Urshifu, but other than that, it's just like meh. Like Fire Terra just kind of destroys this thing, so I don't know. Amoonguss is still very, very good. I'm gonna put it. I'm gonna. It's probably gonna be the top Pokemon on Staples. I think it's gonna be in between these. I had it lower last time, I believe, because it started to fall out of favor, especially with the Miraidon teams running around there. But I think since then it has started to come back, and it's being used for more of a all-around redirection support than it is being used for a Spore user, with the added benefit of it being a Spore user. So just a really strong Pokemon. It's pretty predictable oftentimes, so you gotta take that into consideration too. If somebody knows how to play around it effectively, you know. Muck. You always gotta be ready. I always say this every time. Always be ready for the Muck matchup just in case, because you could just get kind of wiped from it by just missing all your attacks. I don't think it's a good Pokemon, but I think that it's a niche viability because that team is still relevant, right? It's still relevant. But if you have Heavy Slam on your team, like if you're running Zamazenta, bring the matchup on. You know what I mean? Let's go. I want this matchup. I'm just gonna ignore everything that's not Muck. I mean, I'm gonna kill everything that's knock out everything that's not Muck. I'm gonna ignore the Muck. Dark Urshifu. I think Dark Urshifu is very good. I think it's underrepresented. Its win percentage is pretty decent. And yeah, I think we could continue to see the rise of this. I think it's the same thing as Chi-Yu. As Chi-Yu is like has that fire extra typing, and of course we don't have that over here, but we do have the priority. And I think dark typing right now is just very, very strong, and especially hitting through protect, I mean, is ridiculous. Corviknight, I thought would be pretty good, but I'm gonna put this in trash tier. I don't think it is actually any good. I haven't even seen one. And with so many fire types and stuff running around, it's just really, really hard to use a bulky steel type, as they could just take advantage of your typing, and then you have to terastallize it, and that just kind of feels bad. Thundurus though, Thundurus is a Pokemon I've been seeing more of. I'm gonna put it in niche viability still, though I think that could increase in the future. We've been seeing like this replacing Tornadoes, where you're going for Thunder Waves instead of Tailwinds, and it can still set up the rain, and its move is pretty good. So it just seems like it's positioned pretty well. And yeah, I think we might continue to see more of it, and like he doesn't gain any additional weaknesses. He only gains some resistances that Tornadus has. Iron Boulder, he's pretty bad. I'm gonna put him in trash tier. I thought he'd be good because he can hit through protect, but for some reason, when he hits through protect, it just doesn't feel the same. You know what I mean? Like I don't know. Landorus Eye. Landorus Eye is probably up here, staples. This is a very, very good Pokemon. It fits on a lot of compositions. It's good into Miraidon. It's good into Zamazenta. So you can put a lot of pressure on these Pokemon. It's also pretty good into the Koraidon matchup, especially if you can get them to use the terrestrialization early. You can get Tailwind up, something like that. Then this puts infinite pressure on it, as it's a one-shot knockout. Also, the added benefit of being able to burn your opponent with its Sandsear Storm is pretty strong. It's yeah, it's a really, really good Pokemon, and it pressures so many types of Pokemon. So that's really cool. It's not very bulky though, so you gotta be careful for that. Hisuian Gudra, I'm gonna move to trash tier. I thought this thing would be pretty good too, but just Zamazenta just coming in with that +1 already, just like makes any of the Pokemon that do the same thing just feel so much worse. Tyranitar, I think, is still niche viability. I'm going to put it slightly under the Ninetales, only because I've seen more ice teams than I have sand teams, and I think that might just be because, you're using Kyurem White, or it's been performing better. I have no clue, but I'm going to put them, they'll probably stay right next to each other. Klefki, I thought Klefki could have a chance with Trick Room and setting up screens and stuff. I think there's a possibility that's still pretty good. It also gets foul play, so I think there are still some viabilities for it. But for right now, I'm just gonna put it in trash tier, top of trash tier, because I think it still can be there. Now, Screamtail. I think Screamtail is very viable. I'm even gonna put it up here, and I'm not talking about just Wolfglick's team. This is a Pokemon that I actually used recently, like before the international happened. And I was just like, man, I want to use Screamtail because I feel like it's in a pretty good position. And I was right about that, because it felt really, really good to use, though it is a very, very hard Pokemon to use. Don't get that wrong. And make sure that you're ready for those situations where Maybe that Encore or that Disable just isn't enough and not what you need. And be able to switch and position yourself correctly with this Pokemon, avoiding taunts and stuff like that too is very important. So make sure you have the right tools to take advantage of what this Pokemon is trying to do. But it is a very, very hard Pokemon to use. Comfey. I think Comfey is still good. I'm gonna put it in niche viability. It's probably over here. It can heal stuff up. You know, it can go for Drain Kisses, which are really, really good against Urshifu. Especially Urshifu Dark, it just one-shots it. The other Urshifu, it almost one-shots if you invest into special attack. The Draining Kiss will. And you'll heal yourself all the way back up. And it's priority 3. So, like, you're getting past Fake Outs, which is really, really nice. Gastrodon. I thought Gastrodon would be better, but I also said it depends on how good Kyogre is, and Kyogre has been pretty decent, but not to the point where it should be. Also, it just kind of loses to a lot of the matchups. Like, it just doesn't do anything into Calyrex, either of them. It can go for Yawn on the Calyrex Ice Rider, but like, so what? You know what I mean? That kind of thing. So yeah, I just don't think it's that good, but I can't rule it out because it can just win some matchups sometimes. Suicune, I've been seeing more Suicunes. I'm gonna put it over here. I still don't think it's that good, but I've been seeing Calm Mind Suicune, which is a really cool tech for it. It can get Tailwind, Scald. It's one of the few Pokemon that still gets Scald. Ice Beam, Icy Wind, Snarl. So it can do quite a few things. And once again, if you set up those Calm Minds, you can start doing some damage and have a super, super bulky Pokemon because it is pretty bulky, especially if you terrestrialize in the grass. Then there's not really much they can do. Wheezing. I think Wheezing is very viable, but the other Wheezing, right? So I'm gonna put this one down here. I don't think it's as good, but if we can find the other Wheezing here, there we go. This Pokemon is very viable. I think even better than Ditto. It's been used on quite a few teams now, even teams not using the Calyrex Shadow Rider, which is interesting, but that is the best team for it, right? Calyrex Shadow Rider, throw it on there. You don't lose your ability. You can do massive amounts of damage. It has Taunt, Will-O-Wisp. It can go for Toxic Spikes, which I lost to. Calyrex Shadow Rider, Toxic Spikes, and Dondozo. I got absolutely wiped at the GC, which if you want to see that, the live stream is up, so make sure you check that out. It was a interesting time. Breloom. I thought Breloom would have some niche viability, but it's just not good enough. There's another Pokemon that has taken the spot of what that would have done, so we'll get to that in a minute. Talonflame, I think Talonflame is still probably niche viability, but I think it's pretty good. It can set up Tailwind faster than any other Pokemon. It also gets Taunt, that's not priority, that's very, very fast, so that could be important too. Will-O-Wisp is huge, especially into like a non-terrestrialized Koraidon, so if you could pressure Koraidon with something else, make sure it doesn't terrestrialize, then you can get a Will-O-Wisp. Of course, you have to be Focus Sash because Koraidon is extremely, extremely fast. So Talonflame does not outspeed that, but you can go for Brave Birds too into a Pokemon like that and just put a lot of pressure on with it, so it's pretty good. Regieleki, I've seen a couple, but they've never really done anything for like to me, so I'm gonna put it down here. I think it's still probably a niche viability Pokemon. It allows you to go for Electro Webs, Thunder Shocks, or Thunderbolts. You can go for, screens, Thunder Wave. So it could do quite a few things, but nah, it just feels meh. I feel like it's just so frail that it's just really hard to use. Menshao, I think I considered Menshao on the team that I used for the GC, but I ended up going with a different Pokemon that we'll see later. And I'm glad I did, but Menshao is not too bad. Wide guard, it gets fake outs, it gets taunts, it can go for close combat. So it's not bad, and it itself can't be faked out. So that gives it a little bit of advantage there too. But you have to run Focus Sash on this Pokemon. If you don't, it's just gonna get one shot by everything. Umbreon, I'm gonna put Umbreon actually in very viable. I'm not seeing it as much as I think it should be used. This is a very, very good Pokemon against a ton of the meta. It takes a couple of shots to knock out for the most part, and it can one-shot Pokemon like Calyrex Shadow or Ice Rider. It also does decent damage into a few others. It just does have bad matchups into like Miraidon or Terapagos and stuff like that. It just doesn't really do too much into them, though it can go for Snarl in those situations, so you could take that into consideration. Indeedee, I always rate Indeedee high, but I'ma rate Indeedee very high. I've been using Indeedee, and I've been a big fan. If you've been here for a long time, or if you haven't, you can go back and you can watch. I've been a big Indeedee fan since day one. I love Indeedee. I think it's such a good Pokemon. I think setting up Psychic Terrain is just so strong. I think it's better than Farigiraf, though it does it a little bit different, but I think it is better than Farigiraf in basically every single way. You're stopping priority. You're like setting up Trick Room. You're going for Helping Hands. You can go for Heal Pulses. Like, it can do so many different things and put a lot of pressure on your opponent. Moltres, I got absolutely destroyed by a Moltres because I wasn't expecting a Moltres. I don't think it's very good. It's probably better than these three, but I don't think it's very good, but I did get surprised by it and it did beat me. I got to give it some viability still because I think it can do something, especially if you say for endgame, force the terrestrialization out of something else, and then you could bring it in against Calyrex Shadow Rider. It's pretty much GG. Garchomp. Garchomp, I thought would have some niche viability. I thought this Pokemon would still be pretty good, but I'm going to put it in trash. It just doesn't have the damage output. It really doesn't. The meta is so bulky at the moment that you need a Pokemon that can either do something supportively or you have to have Pokemon that can do something offensively. Garchomp doesn't do either of those. It just gets one shot. So, yeah. Mousehold. I think Mousehold's still some viability. I'm probably going to put it... it's probably better than that, yeah. You can still go Follow Me, which is always going to be good. Friend Guard. I've even seen some people using Population Bomb, though I wouldn't put Population Bomb, but you do what you will. And yeah. Fire Pawn. I think Fire Pawn is very viable. I'm going to put it above Screamtail if it lets me. I think it's very viable. It does a lot of damage. It has Follow Me support. It's just a really good Pokemon. Yeah, no complaints out of Fire Pawn. Is performed well in tournaments and it continues to perform well, but Ogerpon Rock is insane. This Pokemon is crazy. I like how it's come full circle too, because this was like considered the worst one early on in its life cycle, and now it's by far the best one. It's not even close. This Pokemon is so busted. It does so much. Rock typing is very good right now. Once again, there's a lot of fire types, but also grass typing is very good. There's a lot of water types or things terrestrializing into water. Be able to redirect spores is so strong. You can go very bulky with this Pokemon, or you can go very offensive because it does have that built-in Focus Sash with Sturdy. It beats Fire Pawn. It beats Water Pawn. I guess it's kind of evened out with with the Grass Pawn. It's like whatever, but yeah, this thing just does so much. It's just such a good Pokemon, and I didn't believe in it like in the past, but I think this is by far the best pawn. Rillaboom still every team, right? It's better than Ogerpon in the most part. Fake Out, setting up grassy terrain, U-turn, Wood Hammer. You can even go knockoff. I've been seeing some people using knockoff. They're foregoing like using Incineroar instead. They're having their Rillaboom do kind of both roles that would be having there, so they can have a different fire type or a different dark type or a Chi-Yu or whatever it might be. So yeah, it's such a good Pokemon. It's insane how strong Rillaboom is. Like, if Incineroar wasn't so good, Rillaboom would be the best of all time, like, starter Pokemon. And it wouldn't even, there's nobody even in second, right? There's like, it's just them two. Dragonite. I think Dragonite's been on the up. I still think it's niche. I think there's certain use cases where it's just pretty bad. But I think overall, it's not a bad Pokemon. It's very strong. It can do a lot of damage, but you have to put it in a situation where it's going to succeed. And against all the ghost types that are sitting around, like Calyrex Shadow Rider, it does make it a little bit harder to use. This is a restricted. That's not supposed to be here. Okay. Iron Hands. Iron Hands is very viable. I'm going to put it here because I think it's less viable than Ogerpon. It just Fake Out, it puts out a lot of damage. I lost 2-1 in the GC that was able to get coachings into it and then go for Water Terra. and I just had no way of hitting it for any super effective damage, and yeah, it was just able to take me out pretty easily with some drain punches and stuff. So yeah, really strong Pokemon. It could just burst damage so much, and especially with like electric terrain or something, it's just gonna do massive amounts of damage. Gallade, I think Gallade has fallen off a little bit. I think it's going to go into niche viability. It was probably very viable in my last one. I didn't look over my last one to make this, but I think it was probably in my very viable. Now it's going to drop down to niche viability. I think it's still pretty good. Wide guard, fighting moves. It's good against Terapagos. It's good against the Moongus. It's a good Terra target as well, though it is pretty frail, especially special defense wise. So you just got to be very careful when using this Pokemon. But if you position it correctly, it's game over. Roaring Moon has increased in viability by a lot. This Pokemon is pretty good. It's going for Tailwinds knockoffs, the same stuff it was doing before, but for some reason now it's better. And it's good into Calyrex Shadow Rider. It's also pretty good into Kyogres or, matching Kyogres. And it's pretty good into Groudon too. So it has a couple of really good matchups, and it could just help your Kyogre team win. But I think Iron Jugulis is maybe a little bit better. But in those teams, yeah, there he is down there. I think overall he's worse though. But we'll get to that. Brute Bonnet. So this is a Pokemon that I wanted to use unironically. I was like, man, I want to just use Brute Bonnet again because I haven't used it so long. And then one of the regionals happened. And then people started using Brute Bonnet, and it's actually pretty decent. I'm going to put it, I think it's slightly above Raichu. It's not bad. It's no Moongus, but it does something a little bit different. It gets Sucker Punch and has quite a huge attack stat. And you can boost that with the sun and stuff. So if you're using a sun team, this could be your choice over a Moongus, which is really cool. It just has so many weaknesses, and you're not going to be able to terastallize it. Raging Bolt. I think Raging Bolt should be every team, but honestly, right now, it just feels a little weak. It has a lot less usage than it was having. Its win percentage isn't that great right now. So it has dropped down quite a bit, but I think it's still a very strong Pokemon and one that you have to take seriously. Sableye, I think, will always be a niche viability Pokemon. It's going to set up Gravity for Groudons now, but it can go for Will-O-Wisp, Taunt, Quash. It has a plethora of moves and exciting things it can do, but at the end of the day, you knock out all its friends, and it just doesn't do anything. Um, Iron Crown, I think Iron Crown's pretty bad. I thought it would be better going into this, but it just really hasn't performed. It's just not really doing anything. Grimmsnarl is very viable. I'd probably put it here. It's been seeing more and more usage, especially on big bulk teams. And what a big bulk team is just a team that's going to try to sit there and outbulk your team and just get incremental damage rather than going for big hits. And a team like that is going to be like Terapagos. We're seeing these on Terapagos teams. Also, we're seeing these on Calyrex Shadow Rider teams that are more bulky and going for, setup moves Calm Mind usually, so you can, bolster your defenses and also your special defense, and then you can just put out big attacks. So we're seeing some increased viability of this Pokemon, and I've always said this Pokemon always gets better with restricted Pokemons because when you're limiting the damage of really high attacks, it's more effective than limiting damage of mid-ranged attacks. So that's why Grimmsnarl always seems better in these, because you're restricted instead of being a one shot is now doing 50%. So it's a big difference. Basiligian hasn't been very good. I'm still gonna put it. I'll put it about here. I've seen a couple of rain teams on it, and it's not really scary. Carbank's trash. I thought it would be okay, but it just hasn't been. Same with Electabuzz. I think Electabuzz was pretty good at the beginning of the format, but now it has really dropped off. Ogerpon is just so good, so people are just foregoing this, going Ogerpon and going for something like the Raging Bolt instead. So yeah, it is still seeing some usage, but I just don't think it's that good. Jumpluff, I'm gonna put down here. I think it's very niche, but it's not bad. Of course, we just got one from EUIC. If you didn't grab yours, that's too bad because it ended like 3 days ago. But It's a pretty good Pokemon. You're gonna go for Sleep Powders, Tailwinds. You can go for Pollen Puffs. I believe it gets too. So there's a couple of few things you can do with it, and it's having a good time. Male Indeedee, I think it's still niche. I don't think it's very good, especially right now. It's just not really out there. It just doesn't do anything to Calyrex, so Calyrex can't do anything back. But it's just not putting out any damage into it, and it just feels meh. Ursaluna. I think Ursaluna is team specific as well. I'll put it down here. Um, as for regular Ursaluna, it's good, but you have to position it so well that it like sometimes just feels really bad when it's sitting in the back and you just can't get that position properly. And then when you do bring it out, you're just like, yeah, no, I just have an Ursaluna and it just can't do anything. It just feels really, really bad. Smeargle is very viable. I'm gonna put this probably. No, it's probably under Wheezing. I think it gets every move, right? Spore, Fake Out, Wide Guard. I've been seeing a lot of Wide Guard recently. This allows you to have a Pokemon that can maybe Spore and Wide Guard in the same turn. Also, it's a Pokemon that you might not expect it to go for Wide Guard, so therefore it's a little bit more viable. Now, the next Pokemon. I said Menshao, how I considered Menshao. I ended up going with Conk. And Conkeldurr is very good. I think people are sleeping on him. I'm going to put him up here. I really, really do. After using him, what I needed from a Pokemon was a fighting type Pokemon. I needed Taunt. I needed Wide Guard, right? So I had considered these things. I was using a Trick Room team. Okay, well, Menshao very fast. I wanted a Pokemon that wasn't using Focus Sash, so I could use Safety Goggles, so I can switch into Amoonguss and taunt it. Conk did all of that. And not only did he do all that, he survives Astral Barrage pretty well. He survives quite a few of the really good attacks, especially single target ones, without really any investment. He's just really good. And not only that, but he just knocks things out back. I was using Iron Fist, so Drain Punch would get increased. I would use Close Combat if I was to do it again. But I'm telling you, knockoff, Drain Punch, Taunt, Wide Guard, this Pokemon is very, very good. He is very underrated. Try it out. Try it out. Clefairy, I think Clefairy is very good. I'm gonna actually put it. I'll put it here. I think it's another Pokemon that's maybe not being used as much as it can. I'm gonna be using Clefairy soon because I'm just realizing how good it is. Farigiraf, I think Farigiraf is fallen off. I just whenever I see this Pokemon, I'm like, yeah, they just gonna lose if they bring it, and then they always bring it, and then they lose. I just don't like it. I think it was good, and maybe at the beginning of the format it was good, and the last time this format was around, it was good. I just think it's lost a lot of its luster. People know how to play around it now. Like it just doesn't really feel that good. On paper, it looks fine, but in practice, yeah, no, you feel like you have to terrestrialize it every single time, and it just feels really, really bad. You could still do Imprison stuff if you want to stop Trick Room, which is fine. You can definitely do that, and therefore it's still very viable because it does have some options. Serena has increased significantly in usage as well. I'm gonna put this under Conk because every time I face Serena, because I was using Calyrex, every single time they terrestrialize into ice and I just Drain Punch it. Because they're always bringing it with Kyogre, right? It's always like Serena Kyogre matchups. And Wyguard is the best into Kyogre matchups, which is something else I needed, and that's why I want Conk. But yeah, they always Ice Terra, so I can just Drain Punch into it, and a Drain Punch one-shots it. If it Fairy Tears. If it does, or Ice Terrors. If it doesn't, then it does like, I think, just over 50% or around 50%, depending on how they're built, if they're special defense or physically defensive. But yeah, it still just does massive damage with Drain Punch. Close combat would probably almost be a knockout. Venusaur. I don't think this Pokemon's very good. I know people like it, but there's just better options. Don't use this. Archludon, I still think is niche viability. I think it's probably up here because it can just win matchups on its own because it is that strong. Like if you can get this thing set up, it's just kind of over for your opponent. Magmar, I think Magmar has fallen off more than Electabuzz has. Maybe it hasn't fallen off because Electabuzz had a higher peak, I guess. So, but it has fallen off. It just doesn't feel very good. just use Volcarona, it's just better. There's a lot of ground attacks going on, so, yeah. And Grass Ogre Pawn, I don't think is that great. I'm gonna put it probably here. It's probably worse than Venusaur. Maybe it's better than Venusaur. But it just does the same thing the other Ogre Pawns do, except it's just grass, you know. So gets a speed boost and it has Defiant, so I guess those are positive aspects of it. I don't know. Sinistra is also niche. I think it's a little bit better. It's probably better than Raichu. It's probably better than that too. Just be able to come in and heal, especially on these big bulk teams, is really, really good. Machigacha can also get burns, which is huge, and it can go for Trick Room. So, very, very good Pokemon. I think. I think it's a little bit underrepresented at the moment. Como is pretty bad. I've seen one actually. I saw one on stream the other day, and it literally didn't do anything. Annihilate. I think Annihilate is still very viable. Probably at the bottom of very viable. I still see Final Gambits. People are going for Rage Fist. Not really any beat ups though. They're mostly Choice Scarf, Final Gambits. So yeah, but still really good Pokemon. Entei has been rising in usage. I still think it's pretty good. It's probably better than these. It's probably better than Dragonite right now too because of the fire typing. There's a lot of sun, like I said. It gets Stomping Tantrum, so you can do damage into fire types, including Incineroar, which can't fake it out or intimidate it. So that's pretty big too. It's good on the Wheezing teams as well because its ability doesn't really matter in most cases unless you're going for the fake out, but then you can do some plays where you switch it out and then you can't be faked out. So there's some really, really cool things you can do with it. Overall, just a really, really good Pokemon. Chien-Pao, very, very viable. Not a staple, not anymore. I think it's still very viable. It's run on quite a few teams. We see it with Miraidon, we see it with Zamazenta, we see it with just Caly-I Shadow Rider sometimes, and just random other compositions, especially if you're running Urshifu Rapid Strike, it's really, really good paired with that because then you're just doing more damage. And Urshifu doing more damage is always going to be terrifying. So I think the Zapdos is still, he's probably the worst in niche viability, but I still think he does have some usage. I think he's okay. But yeah, there's just so many other good fighting types and just so many other fighting things going on, and flying isn't really that relevant at the moment because most of the grass types are being dealt with fire. There's not really any bug types. So what are you really doing, right? We got Goldango. I think Goldango is probably around here. I think it's niche. I've been seeing less and less of it. Once again, a lot of fire types around, a lot of ground attacks going around. So it just makes it really hard to use this Pokemon. You have to put your Terra into it. It's not really hitting any fairy types because it's just basically Flutter Mane. So it's losing on those fronts. Ting-Lu, I think Ting-Lu's probably up here. It's getting better and better. I've liked Ting-Lu since the beginning. I can't use it in this regulation. I tried, and it just feels like cheeks to me. But every time I face it, it feels like the strongest Pokemon that's ever existed. It's going for foul plays. It's going for snarls. I've seen Stealth Rocks to break Focus Ashes. So it's doing some really interesting things, but I just can't use it. It's a skill issue. Speaking of Pokemon that are being used a lot, I'm going to put this at the top of niche viability because Regidrago right now was very, very strong. Speaking of that, there's not really any fairy type Pokemon. This is taking advantage of that in full effect because it's able to just go for Dragon Energies like crazy. Draco Meteor does about a bazillion damage if you decide to click that instead. Like, there's nothing living this next to a Chi-Yu except if you're a fairy type. So, there you go. Scizor, I don't even know why Scizor was on the list. I still think this is probably down here. I think it's probably better than that. I've seen people using it. Nobody's brought it against me, so I don't know what that says, but like, yeah, you can lower the special defense of your opponents and then go for whatever and just do some damage. Okay, Okie Dokie. I used this and it felt pretty good. I'm gonna actually put it. It's probably here-ish. I think it's pretty good. It's pretty bulky, especially if you use Assault Vest. I wasn't using Assault Vest because I wanted to do what Conkeldurr is now doing. So that's why I was using it first because it gets taunt and it gets drain punch and but it does all those things. But it also has guard dog, which is pretty good. So you're not getting intimidated, which is really nice. And you're getting a boost for that, which then you can knock out Incineroar or Drain Punch. So it can do some really cool things. But it just kind of feels mad most of the time. Next is Incineroar. I'm gonna put Incineroar up here. It's been getting better and better and better and better, and now it just feels insane. It just feels like where it was before. It just took people a little while to figure out what we're doing with it, and now that we know what we're doing with it, it's back. He's back. That's it. Articuno, I wish was good. I'm just gonna throw it down here. Glacier. So Glacier has been seeing more and more play. People are using with like Iron Defense Body Press, which is really interesting. So I'm gonna put in niche viability. And yeah, I think it's really cool that people are trying it and just doing something different. Of course, it's just a straight ice type, so you could Terastallize into quite a few different types, and Body Press does about a bazillion damage. So this Lilligant, I'm just gonna put in trash tier. It's not worth using. Torkoal. Okay. Now, I've been using Torkoal. This thing is a second restricted, and I would put it in staples because to me, honestly, that's how it feels. But I'm gonna put it very viable. I'll put it here. I think this Pokemon is insane, and I think if you're not looking into using Torkoal, you should definitely look at Torkoal because this thing is annihilating things. It's crazy how much damage this thing can do with Fire Terror Eruption, even with just Charcoal, because that's all I was using it with. It just does mass amounts of damage. It's crazy. This Pokemon's so good. If, like I said, it feels like having a second restricted Pokemon. It really does. It forces your opponent to have to Terastallize, which makes them weaker to maybe some of the other stuff you're doing. And it also powers up like Raging Bolt and stuff. So like it could just do so much. It just feels so strong. Next is Gouging Fire. This Pokemon has dropped off quite a bit. I'm gonna put it down here. It's probably better than Best Legion. You can go for Howl stuff, but really it's just like Incineroar is just so hard to pass up, right? Hisuian Lilligant. So this is what I was originally using. Instead of Conkeldurr, it was this, and then I changed a different Pokemon into Okidogi, and then I took this out for Conkeldurr because I wasn't using it. Looking at my statistics, I was never bringing this Pokemon in any matchup, and looking at my statistics now, I bring Conkeldurr quite a bit, and it's very, very good. So I think it's much better than that. Pelipper, I hate Pelipper, but I still have to put it up here. It has some niche viability. It's pretty decent. I'm actually going to put it less than Tornadus because I think Tornadus is actually better right now. This Pokemon's okay. I just never liked it. I've never really used Pelipper just because I'm just like, it always just feels so weak. It just feels so weak. We've been seeing some more Wo-Chens. I'm going to put Wo-Chen on here. Not very high, but big stall teams are using this Pokemon. Snarl is huge on it right now with Leech Seed, and it's just kind of sitting around chilling. It's just doing its thing. Water Terra is often common on it. All right, this is a staple Pokemon. I'll put it higher. No, I'm not putting it higher. I think Indeedee is way better than this Pokemon. But it just has so much viability, and it does so much stuff. You can set up the Sun. You can go for Tailwinds. You can reverse Trick Room, which happened to me one time. Encore is very, very strong at the moment. So, yeah, you can do a lot with it. Urshifu Rapid Strike is probably here. I don't like it being here. It's the most used Pokemon at every event so far. So, I mean, you can't really deny it. It honestly is probably here. But, man, Incineroar just feels so strong right now. So, I think we're going to see Incineroar at the next regional this weekend. In Toronto, I think this is going to be up, and this will be a little bit down. But Urshifu will still be the number one used. Hatterene is bad. Oranguru, I'm not sleeping on Oranguru. I think Oranguru's still, it's probably better than these, honestly. I think Oranguru is still very, very good. It's really hard to fit in the team. I think Indeedee is just better at the moment, but if you can instruct, I saw a Miraidon with a choice scarfed Oranguru for instruct, which was really cool. You go for discharge or parabolic charge, and you go for instruct. It didn't win, but I saw it. um, the third best boy here. I'm putting him less than Conk. You know what? You know what? Wellspring, it's lost a lot. It's just fallen off. Miraidon's rise has really punished this Pokemon and like insanely. And now it's just sitting down here. Uh actually it's honestly probably worse than Serena. It just feels really bad. You can never terrestrialize it anymore. In the matchups that it's good in, it's probably the best Pokemon on your team in those matchups, but in the matchups where it's bad, it's literally the worst Pokemon in the game. Tornadus. I think Tornadus is probably the top of very viable, not or the bottom of very viable. It's probably better than these. Yeah, it's better than those. I don't like Tornadus, and the records and its win percentage just shows that this Pokemon is not winning things. It's just not doing well overall in the whole market of each tournament. It's often around 44% win percentage, if not lower, which is not very good. You want the +2 is like a good Pokemon at 50% win percentage. That's like a decent Pokemon. That's like a well-rounded Pokemon you could put on your team, and anything under 48 is just bad. It's just bad. It's real bad. So yeah, being around 44% win percentage in most events is just feeling really bad for it. It does have one or two pop-ups where it's like, okay, well, Tornadus was really good, and there was 2 Tornadus in top 8 or whatever, and yet it'll still have like a 45% win percentage. Like, that's really bad. Cresselia. I think Cresselia is overlooked a little bit. I put it in trash last time, but I'm going to put it up here. I think it still could be pretty good. And with Lunar Blessing, you can use it on these big bulk teams to really heal up your other Pokemon and get rid of their status conditions if somebody's trying to outbulk you. Murkrow, I think Murkrow is probably the bottom of niche viability. It still goes for Haze, Tailwind, so it could still do some stuff. Dragapult, I'm going to put Dragapult around here too. It just hasn't really shown up. I thought it would be better, but it's not really doing anything. I've seen a couple of support ones where they're going for like Will-O-Wisp or Taunt, and it's just not really putting it out there. Sylveon, I'm putting in trash tier. I think this Pokemon's bad. I thought it would be okay because there's not really a huge fairy selection, but it just gets one shot by too many things. Volcarona is definitely very viable. I'm gonna put it probably above Ditto. Below Tornadus, this thing has been taking off a little bit recently, so it's possible that it could jump up to a higher very viable. But for right now, I think this is a good position for it. Iron Valiant, I'm going to put it near the top here of niche viability. This Pokemon's been pretty good. It gets Wide Guard. It does like Taunt. It does quite a few things, so it's a pretty good support Pokemon that's very, very fast. Fluttermane. I'm going to put Fluttermane in the bottom of Staples because I think it's right at the cusp of falling out of Staples right now. It still has pretty good usage. Its win percentage is pretty meh, but it does do quite a few things, and it can have a couple of different builds, whether it be Focus Sash or you're using Booster Energy, using Taunt, using, what's it called? Taunt, Icy Wind, stuff like that. So it does do some stuff, but it's definitely on the verge of going to very viable as it continues to kind of drop in usage. Porygon 2 is probably pretty good. It's just nobody's really using it right now. I think there's just some better options. Trick Room's more of a concept at the moment where you're doing Trick Room so that way you could deal with your opponent's faster Pokemon, and then sometimes you're not clicking Trick Room because your opponent's Pokemon are slower. So Trick Room is kind of in this weird place where you're not really doing a hard Trick Room almost ever. Now it's more of like a soft Trick Room variant in most teams. And Porygon 2 is a very hard Trick Room Pokemon. Gothitelle. I think Gothitelle's still pretty good. I wasn't expecting it to win with Parastrap, but I still think it's still a good Pokemon. I think there's some more usage to this Pokemon that maybe people aren't really looking into just because of that Shadow Tag ability. Potentially going for some of those big bulk teams like I was talking about, and you can bring Gothitelle where you lock them in while they're poisoned or they're burned or whatever it might be, rather than having to go for Fire Spin or whatever that could miss. This just guarantees those things, let them burn away, and yeah, it's pretty good, and it gets Fake Out. Sneasler, I only put him back up here so I can put him back in trash because he's garbage. Stop using him. All right, Ursaluna, Blood Moon, I think it's still very viable. It's probably right here. It has dropped in usage, of course. It's really hard because there's a lot of good fighting types being used, or at least a lot of good fighting type moves being used right now. So it has dropped off quite a bit, but I still think if you get this Pokemon set up and out there, it's gonna win games for you. Let's talk about Iron Jugulus. Like I said, I think Iron Jugulus is actually better in the Kyogre team than Raging Bolt, but it's pretty mad Pokemon. It's going for Snarl, Air Slash, maybe you get some flinches, you got Tailwind, but overall it's pretty mad. And Iron Bundle, I'm gonna put even lower because it's pretty it's eh. It doesn't really do anything to most of the restricteds, and despite outspeeding them, can't really pressure any of them into the next turn. And if you're going for a support one, then it's I don't know. It just doesn't feel great as a support Pokemon. Next is Dondozo. Dondozo's here, right? Dondozo is very, very good right now. I think with the lack of people having haze and stuff, Dondozo has seen a rise. These big bulk teams using Dondozo is also really strong. You have it with the teams that have Calyrex Shadow Rider and, oops, sorry, and the Weezings. You can go for Yawns. You can go for Fissures. We've seen Yawn Fissure do really well. Um, it's just a Pokemon you always have to be considering again, and I hate that. I hate that, and I'm so bad with Dondozo that I wish it wasn't around because it makes me want to use it, and like I said, I suck with it, so I can't use it. But yeah, that is it. And like I said, the rest of these Pokemon, if you see a Pokemon you like in here, a non-restricted, because I just threw the restricteds down here, let me know what that Pokemon is, and maybe I got something wrong, maybe I missed something, because I who knows? Iron Leaves? Iron Leaves? He kind of cooked for like one day, right? So Iron Leaves is pretty decent. But yeah, this is kind of my list. We'll see what happens at the Toronto regionals. There's actually 2 regionals this week. There's one in Brazil and then there's one in Toronto. So we'll see if those metas matching up to what was working at this international championship that Wolf won. And yeah, but anyways, guys, that is the video. If you guys did like the video, make sure you guys thumbs it up. If you're not subscribed, make sure you guys do so. And I'll see you guys on the next one. Bye, everybody.